the safety induction.
Welcome to the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Universitas-Indonesia. Before we start, please allow me to deliver the safety induction. We are in the Auditorium Yuan Sudarsono, second floor of Visip UI. In the room the main door is behind you and the emergency exit is on the left side. The emergency stairs and restrooms are next to this room. Always use the handrail when up or down the stairs. Earthquake emergency procedures. Stay calm and do not panic. If possible, directly out of the building. If not possible, take the shelter under any solid tables or desks. Protect your head and hold. When the shaking stops, evacuate to outside of the building toward assembly point. Fire emergency procedures. Stay calm and do not panic. If able to, put out the fire using fire extinguishers located outside the left side and in front of the main door. If you cannot put out the fire, leave immediately and make sure the building alarm is activated and emergency personnel are notified. Call the emergency number of Visip UI 021 727 0006, extension 217. Evacuation out of the building using the stairs and not allowed to use the elevator. Follow standard evacuation to the assembly point next to the right and behind of this building until declared safe condition. The Faculty of Social and Political Sciences is a non-smoking area. Keep the environment clean and put garbage on the trash bin. This information state of emergency prevailing in this space. Thank you for attention.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The Honorable Malcolm Turnbull, the 20th Prime Minister of Australia, Her Excellency Gary Quitland, the Ambassador of Australia to Indonesia, Dr. Ali Susilo, the Dean of Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Universitas Indonesia, and all the respective participants. Welcome to the public lecture by the 20th Prime Minister of Australia, Malcolm Turnbull. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Jud Jihan Safira, an international relations student, and I will be serving as your Master of Ceremony for today. Australia-Indonesia relation started and formalized in 1949 with Australia's full recognition of Indonesia. Since then, not only geographically close, both countries have fostered closely between the two in terms of political, social, cultural, and economy. In 2018, total two-way trade in goods and services between Indonesia and Australia was worth 17.6 billion Australian dollar, making Indonesia and Australia as important economic partner to one and another. Hence, we are pleased to present you the public lecture by the Honorable Malcolm Turnbull under the theme of advancing the Australia-Indonesia Economic Partnership. But firstly, allow me to give a short brief about the agendas of today's session. First, we will have the welcoming remarks by the Dean of Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Universitas Indonesia, Dr. Ali Susilo, followed by the main agenda, which is the lecture by the Honorable Malcolm Turnbull, moderated by Dr. Evi Fitriani. Then, we will also have the question and answer session, which is followed by the concluding sentence from Dr. Evi Fitriani. Last but not least, there will be the exchange of token of appreciation and photo session. Without further ado, let us proceed to the first agenda. The welcoming remarks by the Dean of Faculty of Social and Political Sciences Universitas Indonesia. Now we invite Dr. Ari Susilo.
Thank you very much, Jude. Very good morning to all of you, especially to our honorable guest, former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull. Honorable Mr. Malcolm Turnbull, we are now in the auditorium of Yono Sudarsono. The Professor Yono Sudarsono, the picture that we can see over there, is the 5th Dean of this faculty in the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, and the first Head of Department of International Relations in this faculty. And after serving as Dean of this faculty, Professor Yono Sudarsono serving several positions in the administration of this government. The first being the Vice Governor of National Resilience Institute of Republic of Indonesia, and then several positions as the Minister in Indonesian Cabinet under President Habibie, under President Habibie as the Minister of, under President Suharto first actually, and as the Minister of Environment, under President Habibie as Minister of Education and Culture, under President Abdurrahman Wahid as Minister of Defense, and then also as Minister of International Division under President SBY. On behalf of the Universitas Indonesia, especially of the Rector President Universitas Indonesia, Professor Muhammad Anis, I convey his regrets, Professor Mr. Malcolm Turnbull, because the Rector of Universitas Indonesia, Professor Muhammad Anis, couldn't join us today in the morning, so he gave the mandate to me to meet you and also the student of this event. The Honorable Mr. Malcolm Turnbull, His Excellency Gary Quinlan, Ambassador of Australia to Indonesia, colleagues and students, I see several head of department at Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, also the Vice Dean, Professor Dodi Prayogo, and our student, thank you very much. So I heard your class in the morning, this morning, moved from your class in Gedung H to this auditorium. Thank you very much. Student from Department of International Relations, Department of Political Sciences, and maybe from also another department at Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, and maybe from another faculty in Universitas Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Universitas Indonesia. It is an honor for us to have the 29th Prime Minister of Australia, the Honorable Mr. Malcolm Turnbull, at Universitas Indonesia today, and to deliver his speech for Universitas Indonesia academic community. In this room, we have students from the International Relations Department of Political Science Department, Faculty of Humanities, and School of Strategic and Global Studies, as well as lecturers across Department of the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Universitas Indonesia. The speech of Mr. Turnbull on advancing the Australia-Indonesian economic relations is very timely, since we are observing turbulence on the world's economy due to the trade wars between big powers. But this is also the time for other countries in the world, including Indonesia and Australia, to enhance their trade engagement and diversity their economic relations. Indonesia and Australia are two close neighboring countries that have had developed relations in the last several decades. It is natural that we have strong relations, not only in economy but also in other aspects, especially people-to-people relation. Indeed, for many Asian countries, robust economic relation can only develop once countries develop trust. People's roles are indispensable in the trust building. In this context, I want to inform you that there are many scholars from this university who studied in Australia-University under scholarship from the Australian government. Their experience of living and studying in Australia have helped them to develop the knowledge and understanding of Australia. The visit and speech by the Honorable Mr. Turnbull this morning is one more step ahead for us to enhance the relation between Australia and Indonesia. We hope there will be more economic interactions between people and the two countries in the future. Once again, thank you for your visit and public lecture in this morning, Mr. Turnbull. We look forward to the speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ani Susilo, for the remarks. Now we have come to the main agenda, the public lecture by the Honorable Malcolm Turnbull under the theme of advancing the Australia-Indonesia Economic Partnership. This special session will be moderated by Dr. Evi Fitriani, the Lecturer of International Relations Department at Universitas Indonesia. Please welcome Dr. Evi Fitriani.
Everyone, I'm Evi Fitriani, very pleased to host a speech by the Honorable Malcolm Turnbull this morning. Before I invite him to come to the stage, let me just briefly read his biography. The Honorable Malcolm Turnbull was Australian 29th Prime Minister and served in the country from 2015 to 2018. He had international career in law, business, and the media before he entered into politics at the age of 50. As the Prime Minister, Mr. Turnbull reformed Australia's personal income tax, education and childcare systems, oversaw the legalization of the same-sex marriage, and announced the construction of the biggest pumped hydro energy scheme in the Southern Hemisphere. Globally, Mr. Turnbull played a leading role in reviving the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, after the United States withdrew. Mr. Turnbull last visit to Indonesia was in October 2018 when he represented Australia at the Oceanic Conference hosted by President Joko Widodo. Mr. Turnbull was a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford University and had successful career as a lawyer and businessman. Without further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Turnbull to the stage, please.
Well, thank you very much, Ibu Evi, and thank you, Pak Ari, and our Master of Ceremonies, Truk Jihan. Very warm welcome. Thank you so much. It really is great to be here at the University of Indonesia. And in these remarkable times, defined by economic and social change, unprecedented in history in both scale and in pace. Our region, the Indo-Pacific, has been both the driver and the beneficiary of that change, experiencing greater prosperity and opportunity than ever before. But the same technologies that have liberated our economies also pose new challenges. Disruption is the new normal, and we must learn to make volatility our friend, not allow it to become our foe. And the best way to do this is to harness the power of change together, to have each other's backs. Indonesia and Australia are natural partners. We're the only members of the G20 from our region. We're neighbours. In fact, much more than just neighbours, we share the longest maritime border between any two nations on earth. And we share the same values: democracy, freedom, the rule of law, mutual respect, Values that are timeless, but never more timely than they are today. Now, we will always be at our best when we work closely together. What happens here in Indonesia is of fundamental importance to Australia and our region, and of course what happens in Australia, which all the students of Australian politics know is of fundamental importance to Indonesia. Our destinies are entwined, and we must work closer and closer together. Now, when President Joko Widodo and I pulled up outside the Tanah Abang market for a blusakan in November 2015, I knew that it was hot. Shouldn't we take off our coats? I asked. No, said Jokowi, you'll be fine. Well, he was fine. But after 20 minutes or so, the sweat was pouring through my eyes, and I had to take off my coat and tie, and to my great relief, so did Jokowi and Tom Lembong, who was with us. Although, I have to say, the President did not have a bead of sweat on his face. He's cool in every respect. Now, at the visit, I was really struck by the enthusiasm the people had for the President. The little children who wanted to kiss his hand, the relaxed and humble way the President spoke with them. It was clear to me that this remarkable nation had a remarkable leader. And it was clear to me that Indonesia today is as full of energy as the Tanah Abang market and the people I met had when we travelled there on the blusakan. The President has seized on that energy and translated it into tangible wins, which are turbocharging Indonesia's economy and paving a path for more success to come. He's increased spending on infrastructure, which is the lifeblood of any economy, with 7 new airports and thousands of kilometres of new roads built in less than 4 years. And he's led the charge to open up the economy so that it is more competitive in the region. He's embraced free trade with partners from Australia and in Europe. And as we're fond of saying in Australia, President Jokowi really has declared Indonesia is open for business. Because when you look at what is projected for the future of Indonesia, a nation that's already responsible for a third of ASEAN's total GDP, today Indonesia is the world's 16th largest economy. It has demographics on its side. Demography is destiny, as I'm sure you've all learned here. It's with half of its population under the age of 30. To the students here, you know it'll be your talent, your dynamism, and your economic power that will drive Indonesia into the world's top 10 economies and into the top 5 in little more than a decade, well within our lifetimes. But success is never guaranteed. We need to create it. Indonesia is currently Australia's 14th largest trading partner. And yet the full potential of trade between our two countries has not been reached, particularly given the size, the proximity and the increasingly complementary nature of our economies. The stock of Australian investment in Indonesia in 2018, for example, was 5.6 billion Australian dollars. The stock of Indonesian investment in Australia, only 1.1 billion dollars. In fact, Indonesia's exports to Australia were just 1.6% of its total exports in 2018. The truth is that our economic relationship to date has been underdone compared to our trade and investment, Australia's trade and investment with other ASEAN countries. So both President Jokowi and I recognise that, and that was why we're committed to working together to build a stronger partnership, a stronger economic partnership. Of course, we have very close relationships on a government-to-government level. Ambassador Gary Quinlan and his team a large team here are working to help build roads, establishing a pilot to connect households to water, which is now being developed into a national template. We're supporting the leveraging of substantial infrastructure loans from the ADB and the World Bank. And we're working with your own finance department to help with the digitalisation of Indonesia's tax system, which is vitally important project for any country's long-term prosperity. And none of this, of course, is this is not an exercise in economic theory. Trade and cooperation of this kind means jobs. It means jobs in Indonesia, it means jobs in Australia. It's about prosperity and economic opportunity. And so last year, we elevated the formal status of the relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership. And that gives Australia and Indonesia a secure platform from which to work more closely together. We also held the Indonesia-Australia Digital Forum. Now, this was a joint initiative of President Jokowi and mine, producing new commercial opportunities for Indonesian and Australian companies and reinforcing our collective reputation as modern, cutting-edge digital economies. And the more cooperation you get, the more productivity, the more innovation you will find. Indonesia has already developed 4 digital unicorns, startups with a valuation of more than $1 billion. Gojek, Tokopedia, Traveloka and Bukalapak, which I visited Bukalapak on Thursday, and I met so many graduates of Australian universities there. Some of whom, I might say, in defiance of the climate, but in devotion to their Australian universities, were wearing their Sydney and Melbourne University hoodies, which I thought would have been very warm. But nonetheless, it was great to see their devotion to the Australian universities. But there are also their senior managers, like Willis Hallam and Dr. Teddy Onomo, who worked in e-commerce and finance in Australia. There are Australians working in Bukalapak, here in Jakarta. And so you can see that what you're getting is just the practical outcome of closer cooperation. Indonesians learning from Australians, Australians learning from Indonesians, producing greater outcomes. That is what cooperation and partnership is all about. That's how networking works. That's how you get better outcomes. And of course, it is that which inspired us to get on moving with the Indonesia-Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, or the IA-CEPA, which is a free trade agreement, in other words. Now, this is very close to my heart because it's been kicking around for a long time, the IA-CEPA. But in 2016, President Jokowi and I decided that we should really get on with it and get it done. And I think it was driven in large part by the strong friendship that was developed between us and indeed between our wives, my wife Lucy and Ibu Iriana. And of course, we all had a very strong interest in urban issues and planning, which of course is, as you know, is the President's great passion. President Jokowi is one of the most important leaders in the world today. And as Indonesia's president, he leads the largest majority Muslim nation in the world. And as he says, demonstrates that democracy, Islam and moderation are compatible. He is a powerful advocate for those important values. And in these times of increasing global tension and rising intolerance, his values, Indonesia's values, are more important than ever. The President is focused on delivering the right outcomes for his people. And every leader has to be. As one great American politician said, all politics is local. But the global significance of your President should never, ever be underestimated. He is a powerful advocate for values that are being challenged around the world today. Now, the IA-CEPA represents a shift in the contemporary mindset towards our trade and investment relationship, and it will be an instrument for promoting the sharing of knowledge and skills of the kind I've described. It'll cement our places in the expansion of global value chains, and it is a statement of open trade and a bulwark against creeping protectionism. As Ibu Evi announced earlier, one of the things I succeeded in doing was keeping the Trans-Pacific Partnership alive after Donald Trump pulled out. I'm absolutely, passionately committed to free trade and open markets. There is no question that that is what delivers stronger economic growth and more jobs. And, remember what Deng Xiaoping said, back in the late 70s when he went south on his great southern tour and he started to open up China. And he said that in the days when China was open to the world, in the days of Zheng He, the great Muslim navigator, Chinese navigator, who sailed through this archipelago and into the Indian Ocean, he said China was strong, and then when it became closed to the world, it became weak. Societies and economies that are open and embrace the world are strong economies. And protectionism is not a ladder to get you out of the low growth trap. It's a shovel to dig it deeper. It is absolutely self-defeating. It's like tariffs. You hear Donald Trump talks about tariffs and how much the Chinese exporters are paying in additional tariffs. Tariffs are a tax on the consumers, paid by the consumers of the country which imposes them. You take Indonesia's legendary noodles, instant noodles, world famous instant noodles, made with Western Australian wheat, right? And then of course exported as noodles to Australia for Australians, particularly Australian university students who live on noodles, instant noodles, like I'm sure you do. That's a great example of a complementarity in trade. But let's say Indonesia were to impose a big tariff on that wheat. What does that do? That increases the price of noodles in Indonesia, which reduces the living standards of Indonesians. It makes the export of the noodles less competitive in other markets. It is literally a lose-lose. So the bottom line is that when we reduce tariffs, when we open up trade, we create more jobs. We've learned that lesson in Australia. We used to have very, very high protection decades ago, and we woke up to that reality. One of the reasons why we've had 28 years of economic growth without a recession, which is almost unprecedented in the world, is because of an free trade and an open economy. Now, the IA-CEPA will reduce tariffs on goods. It'll improve administrative procedures, which are just as important, frankly, and remove behind the border barriers to trade, and establish high-quality modern rules for services, investment, and digital trade, and that reduces transaction costs for businesses. We hope that the IA-CEPA, we expect it to be ratified soon, both by our respective parliaments, and so that businesses can start using the agreement, the economic benefits can start to flow. The next big regional trade deal that Indonesia is a party to is the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. That covers 16 countries and over a third of the world's population, including China and India. But again, in some of those countries there are very strong protectionist tendencies which are holding it up. I hope that in the years to come, Indonesia will join the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I hope that one day the United States will come back into it, frankly. And because that is a very high quality free trade agreement. Let me turn to human capital, given that we're here at this acclaimed university. And this is, again, one of President Jokowi's highest priorities. We've got very strong links in education, as you know. There were 20,000 enrolments of Indonesian students in Australian tertiary and technical colleges last year, and I hope that will grow. And we're also encouraging students from Australia to study in your universities through the new Colombo plan, which Julie Bishop, our former Foreign Minister and my former Deputy, started in 2014. And Indonesia is the most popular destination for students under the new Colombo plan. We're all well aware of Indonesia's demographic dividend. You know, I talked about demography being destiny. You currently have more people of working age in Indonesia than you do of non-working age. In other words, there are more people in the working age bracket than there are children or older people. But that's a very big advantage, not to be underestimated, compared to many of the world's economies, including Japan, Taiwan, South Korea and Singapore, just in our region. It is having a large workforce relative to the rest of the population enables you to generate the economic growth and the revenues to provide the support for the young, good education for the younger people, good health services and other services for older people. It's absolutely critical, but you don't get the benefit of that demographic dividend unless that workforce has the skills needed to be as productive as possible in a modern economy. So, you know, we're working closely with Indonesia on a number of education programs. We have a program which is studying how student learning outcomes in literacy and numeracy can be improved in primary schools and districts, including in both cities and in rural areas around Indonesia. For example, in locations where students and teachers use local languages at home, the program is trialling early years teaching in those local languages to improve learning outcomes, and the early results have been very positive. As was mentioned earlier by Pak Ari, we have large scholarship programs for Indonesia under the Australian Awards program. More than 9,000 Indonesians have studied at Australian universities on scholarship programs, with many going on to take leadership positions and make a very significant difference and a positive contribution to Indonesia's development. One of the benefits of the IA-CEPA is that it will allow a majority Australian ownership of technical and vocational training service providers in Indonesia. Australia has a very good, admired, globally admired vocational training system, and so there's an opportunity for more vocational training companies and services in Indonesia supported by Australian firms. So this educational cooperation, of which I guess today is part, is a critical element in our closer economic relationship. But above all, what we need to do is to resist the lure of populism and protectionism. You know, it's rampant everywhere. You see it all around the world, in the developed economies and developing economies. The truth is that the more open we are, the more prosperous we will be. If you look through all of global history, societies that have been open, cities that have been open, that have embraced free trade, that have embraced diversity, that have had respect for people of other backgrounds, other religions, other races, those societies have been the strongest and the most successful. And you can find that whether you're going back several thousand of years into classical history or even looking at the modern day. So I believe that we've got the foundation to have a stronger and stronger and deeper relationship. We have also, history is important, particularly here at a university. My mother used to be a professor of history, among other things. We have the benefit of being old friends. Our partnership goes back to the origin of Indonesia as an independent nation. I was just talking about with the Dean about staying in the Majapahit Hotel in Surabaya where the courageous students tore the blue strip off the Dutch flag and so was left flying the red and the white flag of an independent Indonesia. But Australian troops were instrumental in the liberation of the Indonesian archipelago from the Japanese forces in 1945, and Australia was one of Indonesia's strongest supporters in its bid for independence. So strong that President Sukarno chose Australia to represent Indonesia in the United Nations negotiations in the lead up to independence. It was an honour then and remains so today to have been present at the birth of a nation. Now, as we move together into the future, there's no doubt the world around us is changing. As the Dean said, power centres are shifting and the region in which we live is experiencing profound change. We confront both uncertainty and ambiguity, but we must take advantage of that. We have to be an optimist. I am absolutely convinced the opportunities far outweigh the challenges we face. We have the opportunity to ensure that our region, the most dynamic on earth, remains at the centre of this remarkable economic growth, which has seen hundreds of millions of people lifted out of poverty. The future expects a lot of us, and this is not a time to be cautious with our ambition. It's an opportunity for students like yourselves to be at the forefront of this change, to harness new technologies and innovation, and continue to contribute positively to regional stability and economic growth, to promote the free and open international rules-based order that's been the bedrock of our prosperity over the past 50 years. And so to all of you, Indonesia's future leaders, I encourage you to play your part in enhancing the relationship between Australia and Indonesia for the benefit of both our countries. I thank you for being a part of it, and I wish you all the very best for your futures and for your future careers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Turnbull, for a very inspiring speech on the relation between our two countries, and you also touched upon some historical relations of our two countries. Actually, several weeks ago, on one of our television, there was a coverage on the documentary film of the relation of the two countries during the Indonesian independence, and how Australian laborers in some of the Australian ports support Indonesian independence movement by boycotting Dutch ships, and was already on the television several weeks ago. So, I would like to invite questions and comments from students and audience for. Okay, I already so 1, 2, 3. Okay. Hang on. There are so many. So look, they are so interested in your. Okay, let us divide it into two sessions first. Yeah, 5 questions per session. Okay, I'll start with 1. Oh, the one on the back. 2, 3, 4. Okay, 5 at the back. Yeah. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Can I kasih di? Lagi yang ini yang. Yeah. Please mention your name and then question. Make it as brief as possible. Please stand up.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is Bintang, student of International Relations here in Australia-Indonesia. I'm going to ask you one question. If we take a look at the trade balance between Indonesia and Australia, from the Ministry of Trade of Indonesia, we can find that our trade trend towards Australia is getting negative. So, what do you think is the cause of this trend, and what is your recommendations to our economic sector so that we can export more to your country? Thank you so much.
Second, yeah.
First of all, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Ravi. I'm one of the students from Department of Political Science. This may be off topic, but I really wanted to know your thoughts regarding Australia's position between the trade war that happens between China and the US. Thank you so much.
kita dari di sini. Ini kasih dulu. Ya.
Thank you for the opportunity. I am Ari from English Studies, Faculty of Humanities, and I have read from the Australian government website about the SEPA that it includes simplifying paperwork, and I would like to know how the SEPA assures security.
Yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Indriana Kapini. I'm a PhD student in political science, and I'm also one of the awardee of the Australian Partnership Scholarship. I'm the alumni of the University of Melbourne. It's such an honor for me to meet you here, Mr. Turnbull. My question is related to the question about the trade deficit between Indonesia and Australia. Last year, one of the factors is because of the export of the livestock of Australia to Indonesia that make it, the balance is not really equal. So by the signing of the SEPA, do you think is there any opportunity for Indonesia to make the trade balance between Indonesia and Australia? So in the future, the relationship between Indonesia and Australia, especially in economic relations, would be equal. And the second, related to the political system in Australia, you're the 29th Prime Minister in Australia. Compared to Indonesia, we only have 7 presidents. So in Australia, it's easily to change the Prime Minister. What makes it, why it happened in Australia, and why it did not influence to the economic and political situations in Australia. Thank you very much.
Question for this, for this session.
Thank you very much for the good chance for me. I'll introduce myself. My name is Ahmad Horul from Pasca Sarjana Political Science of University of Indonesia. We know the first asking. We know that just few days ago, Australia issued a wonderful policy when Indonesian government want to pass the law, RUU KUHP. The policy is about travel warning. We know that Australian people is one of the big visitor in Indonesia. Even our Ministry of Tourism has a target that 1.5 visitor in Indonesia. For this problem, so how to make this relation, Indonesia and Australia, still good relation and get win-win solution. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 5 questions. The last.
Thank you very much indeed. Let me go through them. The first question and the first half of the fourth question were about the balance of trade. Let me just say it's very important not to see trade as a zero-sum game. This is one of the areas where I respectfully disagree with Donald Trump, because he takes the view that if America has a trade deficit with another country, then America is losing and the other country is winning. That's actually not how trade works. Australia has a trade deficit with the United States, which that doesn't trouble us. It's a fair trade, it's a level playing field. We have a trade surplus with Japan, for example. That doesn't worry Shinzo Abe because he then has a surplus with other countries. So you've got to look at trade on an overall basis, and the extent to which the relations between any two countries are in surplus or deficit will depend entirely on the particular complementarities of those two countries. So that's the first point I'd make. The IA-CEPA certainly opens the door even wider to Indonesian exports to Australia. One of Indonesia's biggest exports to Australia obviously is tourism, which the gentleman who asked the fifth question asked about. And President Jokowi, as you know, has said he wants to have many barbers, he wants to encourage more tourism. And I think that's that is certainly a great way of, that is a great, in effect, services export. Could I just also say that a critical thing, a question that a lot of people in Indonesia are concerned about, legitimate, is that as you've seen manufacturing companies relocate from China because of the US-China trade war, which I'll come to in a minute, they haven't been relocating to Indonesia. I think one of the reasons for that is that it is harder to set up a business here than it is in other countries like Vietnam. I think it is also the protectionism works against you, because in global supply chains, if you make it hard to import the components of manufacturing, you actually make it hard to manufacture. So if you want to be a manufacturing economy, you want to be as open as possible, so that you can bring in all of the componentry and elements, whether it is capital goods, machinery, or whether it is literally just the components that are part of the products that you are making. So fundamentally, if the goal is to have more exports from Indonesia, the way to get there is to have enable more investment. More foreign direct investment is obviously advantageous. All of the evidence and experience around the world demonstrates that if you have more foreign direct investment, you'll get more domestic investment. Again, we are a case study for that in Australia. So I'm not theorising. So I think those are the keys. But don't make the mistake of thinking that the benefit of a trading relationship, it's only a benefit if the trade is balanced or if you have a surplus. The real question is, are you benefiting from it? And you're benefiting from it because of the complementarities. Because, in other words, it's more efficient for you to buy something from that country and to make something else and sell to them. It is the key insight into modern trade, and the one thing that we have learned is that free trade and open markets creates more jobs. Now, this is counterintuitive for many people. I mean, protectionism is very popular. So politically, it's often a hard sell, but the evidence is there, and it's one of the reasons why in Australia, actually, despite some arguments from time to time, there's actually bipartisan support for free trade, across both the left and the right. Now, just on the US-China trade war, which is the second question, look, I don't think this is likely to be resolved anytime soon. I think the parties are a long way apart, and I think that rivalry is likely to continue for some time. So clearly, everyone would like it to be resolved. I mean, I've made that point when I was PM, and my successor Scott Morrison has done the same. But I don't think you'll see a quick or easy resolution there. But there are a lot of issues, and I don't think as the temperature of the rhetoric gets amped up, I don't think that actually benefits a cool, clear-eyed assessment of the issues and a resolution of them. I think it was Ari asked about simplifying paperwork. How does that assure security? Well, I don't think there's any issues about security, Ari. A lot of lesson that just about anyone in business will have learned. If you want to sell something, you've got to make it easy to buy. And if you want to have trade, you've got to look at the trading process and say to yourself, what are the things that create friction? Whether they might be a tariff, they might be, laborious processes to demonstrate certificates of origin, whatever. Just got to look at all of those things and then just cut through them. I think this is what I used to do when I was in government. I think with governments, with regulations, and I think this will be part of the focus of the President's omnibus bill, as I gather from what I've read in the press. I think you've got to look at every regulation afresh. You've got to say, with respect to a regulation, what is the objective it's seeking to achieve? That's the first question. Is that objective still legitimate? Now, if it's not, if the objective it's seeking to achieve is no longer one of concern, then get rid of the regulation. If the objective is still an important one, it might be vitally important, like ensuring that water sold is clean, for example. Then you ask yourself, are we using the most efficient means of achieving that objective? And if the regulation does not do that, and if there's a more efficient way of doing it, then move to do so. We get a lot of regulations in government, and this is a feature of governments everywhere in the world, including in Australia. It's easier to make new ones than to abolish old ones. And you've actually got to have a discipline that says when you introduce a new law or a new regulation, make sure you get rid of some old ones as well, because otherwise you just build up this mountain of regulation, which is a barrier to trade. Now, the final question was, why does Indonesia have 7 presidents and we've had 29 prime ministers? Well, actually 30 by now. Yes, well, under our parliamentary system, it is easier to dispense with prime ministers than it is under a presidential system, and that's. I don't think anyone feels that's been a good experience in Australia, and both major parties now have rules to make it harder to change prime ministers in the course of government. But it is a testament to the political stability of Australia that despite those changes in prime minister, the ship of state has sailed on. Every now and then the crew throw the captain overboard, but the ship sails on, and that's a great tribute to the inherent stability of the system.
Thank you, Mr. Turnbull, for a very extensive response, especially to the negative trade balance between Indonesia and Australia. May I open the second session now? Okay, choose one of the one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Start with this. Yang kedua itu,
Okay, thank you for the chance given to me. My name is Raisi. I'm a graduate student of International Relations Studies. In the last part of your speech, you said that Indonesia and Australia have strong relations in history. Yeah, that is right, but it's one thing. But another thing is that recently we cannot deny that sometimes Indonesia and Australia has friction, especially in government decision. For example, when Indonesian decide to punish the drug seller with death penalty, but in another side, Australia really challenged that decision. And also in refugee part, we also have friction with Australia. My question is that, is there any relationship between those frictions with the image of Indonesian as a country in Australia, in the eyes of Australian citizens as a whole? And if yes, how how to overcome that bad image or that different decision or different perception between the citizens of those countries. How to the government of Australia overcome that issue to make to advance the trade between these two countries. How to make our economic relations better than before. Thank you.
Thank you. And second question, yes.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Muhammad Rifki Alazi from the Department of International Relations. And my question to you is that it's very clear from what we gather that you are a very outspoken advocate for free trade economies between countries. But we must also realize the danger from free trade economies. There is that monopoly, and also it could be disadvantageous for people that have little to no economic capital in their respective countries. So my question to you is that, do you advocate for the very real meaning of free trade economies, that is unregulated and those who have no rules? Or do you still believe in some sort of regulations between the countries? And if you do believe so, how much regulation do you think is ideal for free trade economies between countries? Thank you.
Thank you. Third question.
Okay, thank you very much for this question. My name is Muhammad, student of International Relations on Master Program, Universitas Indonesia. Well, we know, Mr. Turnbull, that stability is the important factor in the relation between two countries, especially in the economic cooperations. And then my question is, what is the commitment of Australia in the context of political and security stability in Indonesia? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Number 4 then.
Thank you. My name is Muhammad Iqbal Damani. I am from postgraduate of political science. All of your speeches I didn't hear about environmental and climate issue. So as we know, Indonesia and Australia has a big industry about coal, and as we know too that when you have ever prime minister, you agree about Adani investment in Queensland. So I really want to know how about your opinion about environmental and climate issue about and balancing in economic growth. Thank you.
Okay, good day, the Honorable Malcolm Turnbull. I'm Enrico Christian, student majoring in political science. I want to ask two questions, one regarding environmental issues and one regarding economic advancement. So in 2016, America pulled out from the Paris Climate Accord, but the latest report from the BP Statistical Review of World Energy finds that in 2017, America reduced its carbon emission by 0.5%, while the economy grew by nearly 3%. They have the best of both worlds. And I read today in the Sydney Morning Herald that the Honorable Scott Morrison has responded to the growing pressure over the environment by a plastic push, which he pledged $167 million in funding for Australian recycling investment plan. My question is, in the status quo, is domestic policy is more effective than international agreements when it comes to environmental issues? The second question, the Honorable Mr. Malcolm Turnbull. I actually love Austrian economics. I love low taxes, free market economy, minimal government intervention, and capitalism. But regarding Indonesia's current political climate, there's a theory called lame ducking in public policy. Basically, the president is in the final period of office. He could actually push a policy that the people does not support because he does not need our voice in the next election. These past few weeks, thousands of students have held court demonstrations in front of the House of Representatives, pushing for a political and civil freedom. In the current global trade economy, does a country need to eliminate political and civil freedom to advance economic progress like Singapore, or political and civil freedom still a priority? Thank you.
Right. Okay, thank you very much. I think I've got all those. just going to Racey's question, the first one. Am I on? Yeah, okay. Well, look, going back to the issues relating to the death penalties on two of the drug traffickers that you referred to. Look, Australia does not have the death penalty, and we always encourage other countries not to exact the death penalty. But it's very important that we do so in a way that respects the laws of other countries. And there are many countries that have the death penalty, many parts of the United States have the death penalty, and many countries in the region do. Equally, there's many countries that don't. When we advocate, and this is one of the jobs our ambassadors have, when they go to a country and whether Australia is being convicted of a capital offence and has been sentenced to death, we'll always argue that mercy or clemency be extended. But again, we have to do so. We should always do so in a manner that is respectful of other countries' legal systems. As far as the refugee issue is concerned, I would say this: I think that both Indonesia and Australia benefit from the Australian government's policy of discouraging people smugglers, because it means that the people smugglers are not only less likely to get people on boats with all of the dangers and risk and drownings that follow, but it also means that there will be fewer people smugglers bringing would-be refugees or refugee claimants to Indonesia. So I think, frankly, our interests are aligned in having, as far as Australia is concerned, a refugee program that is orderly. It's certainly a generous one, but we believe it is a fundamental sovereign right of any country, every country, to determine whether people can come across their borders or not. And I think, if you look at recent history around the world, where countries have lost control of their borders, it's often resulted in very adverse political outcomes. Unregulated free trade, second question. Well, of course, no one's in favour of that. Laissez-faire went out of fashion a very long time ago. I think particularly with respect to monopolies, you need to make sure that monopolies are discouraged, and where monopolies are natural monopolies, like a transmission network. You're not going to have two transmission networks in any area for electricity. Where you've got natural monopolies, they have to be regulated in a way that ensures that they're not exacting a monopoly rent. In other words, that they're getting a fair return on their capital and no more. But certainly we have very strong competition laws in Australia administered by the ACCC. Has a particularly zealous chairman at the moment, a good friend of mine, Rod Sims, and I think they do a very good job at policing that. It's something you've got to be very careful of. And just remember, I just make this one point: a government-owned monopoly can be just as exploitative as a privately owned monopoly. And in fact often is more exploitative. So, it's monopolies are a risk in any economy. Where they can't be avoided, then they've got to make sure that they're properly regulated. And again, there are plenty of examples in Australia of how that is done. Mohammed, the third question asked, what's Australia's commitment in the context of political stability in Indonesia? Well, Australia is absolutely, the political affairs of Indonesia are for Indonesians to manage, but Australia absolutely supports, for example, the territorial integrity of Indonesia. So, and we, from our point of view, We welcome, support, and celebrate the political stability and the practice of democracy in Indonesia. But Indonesia's democracy is something for Indonesians to manage, just like Australia's democracy is something for Australians to manage. The fourth question, also from Mohammed, was asked about coal. Yes, Australia and Indonesia are both big coal producers. Let me give you my views. I think coal's days are numbered, frankly. It's a question of timing and transition. I don't believe there will ever be a new coal-fired power station built in Australia. It's my sincere belief. I think the reason for that is that for new electricity generation, the combination of variable renewable energy, by which I mean solar photovoltaics and or wind, plus storage, is going to be cheaper. I don't think there's actually very little doubt about that. One of the projects I got underway in Australia, very big one, which was mentioned in the introduction, is the Snowy Hydro 2.0, a huge pump hydro project. And you see, just if you think about the economics of solar, for example, it's zero marginal cost generation. In other words, the cost of generating an extra megawatt hour of electricity is zero, because you don't have any cost of fuel. Same for wind. And so you'll get, where you've got a lot of solar and wind, you'll get periods where you have more energy than you need and periods when you don't have enough. And so storage or firming is absolutely critical. And so the very long proven technology is simply to pump water uphill when electricity is cheap. You lose about 25% on the round trip, and then when electricity is more in demand and the sun has gone down and the wind's stopped, you run the water down the hill again. There are other technologies too, talk about it if you're interested, but I'd encourage you, if you're interested in some of this, have a look at the Snowy Hydro website. There's a lot of very good economic papers on this important development, but I don't think there's any doubt that is where we're going to head. The fifth question mentioned that the United States has reduced emissions. That's true. That is partly because of new renewables. It's also because of a big switch to gas. Gas, typically, if you're burning black coal in a modern coal-fired power plant, you will emit about 0.9 of a tonne of CO2 for every megawatt hour of electricity. Gas is about half that, or less than half that. If it's an older station or it's brown coal, the emissions are much higher. So that's in large part the reason in America. But again, we've in this technological shift where renewables plus storage, and of course that also includes batteries and other technologies, is the cheaper form of new electricity. In terms of the students, last question was about students protesting for freedom. The question was, does a country need to have less freedom to have more economic growth? The answer to that is no. The reality is that obviously every country has to have laws, every society needs laws, and when people exercise their freedom, they have to make sure they're not, in doing so, constraining the freedom of others. So always where you draw the boundaries, that's what laws are all about in a free society. But there is no doubt, and I think we've demonstrated, that if you have economic and political freedom can march hand in hand. And as I said, open societies will be more innovative and more prosperous. But it's not. There's no simple slogan solution. There's a lot of things you've got to get right. But I think generally, freedom is the key to greater opportunities and to stronger economic growth, but ultimately freedom is the way each of us, unique individuals, created by God, each of us unique. It's the way we can realise our own destiny in our own way, realise our own dreams in our own way. Freedom is what enables us to do that. That is the fundamental dignity that every human being should be entitled to and should aspire to.
Thank you. I think we have to close this question and answer session. I would like to just give a brief conclusion for this speech and discussion. I would like to highlight the concern by Mr. Turnbull about the potencies of economic relations between Indonesia and Australia that have been so high, but the reality is quite low. So we are actually under our potential. It's important that Australia-Indonesia SEPA, Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, should be realized soon and can be used to boost the economic relation of the two countries. And secondly, I would like to highlight the statement by Mr. Turnbull about concern by some of the students about the deficit to Australia in the trade. Then balance of trade is not zero-sum games, because the negative in this with one country can be overcome with the positive surplus with other countries. So in this global change network, we have to consider also the whole economic before we can consider the negative or positive effect of the country. And also would like to highlight some of the concern from the students about the issue of the two countries, Indonesia and Australia, regarding some of the political issues like refugee, territorial integrity, and also global warming, but it has been all responded by Mr. Turnbull quite sophisticatedly. And lastly, about the climate change, how Australia also tried to overcome the problem of economic demands, energy demands by using more renewable energy, and that even though Australia is one of the coal producers, I understand, now but Australia also tried to build other source of renewable energy that can support the economy. I would like to close this session by thanking all of you, and please join me to thank Mr. Turnbull for a wonderful speech this morning.